Well, EU countries say they want the facts after 2 weeks of inconsistent statements made by Saudi Arabia that started with the assertion that Jamal Khashoggi had actually left the consulate in Istanbul unharmed. EU leaders are now struggling to believe in the Saudis' explanation that the journalist has finally died as a result of a fist fight inside that embassy. The strongest words coming from Germany, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel saying that she is ready to halt weapons exports to Saudi Arabia under the current circumstances. Other EU countries have not gone that far, but there's been here a consensus that more needs to be learned, that more light needs to be shed into just what happened to the journalist. The British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, speaking about this case, said that the Saudis' explanation was not exactly credible and that nothing could justify this killing. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said that France will demand an exhaustive and diligent investigation into what happened, and that those responsible must be, one, identified, and two, brought to justice, and that is paramount to the stability of the relationship between France and Saudi Arabia, a relationship that Jean-Yves Le Drian described as being based on frankness and transparency. So for now, tough words, the pressure is mounting, but the vast majority of EU countries are saying that they are going to wait for the findings of that Turkish investigation before deciding what kind of punishment, if any, they will impose on Saudi Arabia.
And Annalise, we know that Saudi Arabia has made numerous arrests over this. What do you make of that?
Well, clearly, Saudi Arabia is under unprecedented pressure over this case. And on Friday, they came out to say that this has been a terrible mistake and that those responsible will be brought to justice, and also said, in an attempt perhaps to show that they are serious about this case, that 18 suspects are in custody and that 5 top officials have been fired. Among those top officials is Saudi Arabia's chief intelligence officer, Ahmed Al-Asiri. Ahmed Al-Asiri, who was a former spokesperson for the Arab coalition in Yemen, a high-ranking official with close ties to the Saudi royal family. Back in March, he came here to Paris to prepare for the Crown Prince's visit to France, and I got a chance to sit down with him and ask him a couple of questions about Saudi Arabia's role in the region, about the war in Yemen, but also about that so-called push for reform driven by Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia. I asked, for example, whether or not freedom of expression and freedom of speech were part of that drive. Take a listen to what Ahmed Al-Asiri had to say. Your 2030 vision includes reforms that involve also women, the relationship that Saudi Arabia has with Islam. What about social rights? What about, because driving is of course important, but what about other rights, including freedom of expression, freedom of speech? If somebody doesn't agree with the Saudi Arabia government today, can they say so? Will they be able to say so in 2030?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, there is a lot of things to do. We cannot do everything at the same time. And to modernize, to reform a society, you need to go gradually. A very quick changement will cause a very quick negative sides. We reform all those what you mentioned, and to see first where is the reference in the religion, then what is the reaction of the society to those kind of a changement. Those what you mentioned is a small things, but it shows the intention of His Majesty the King and his government to change gradually toward an objective.
So Ahmed Al-Asiri speaking there about the intention behind the kingdom's drive to change. A strong commitment, he said, from the royal family. Well, if Saudi Arabia is indeed found to be behind this killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, it will prove, of course, that the kingdom's objective to show itself as a more modern place, well, it's far less progressive than the rest of the world was made to believe, Bill.